You that we have received through the largesse of one of Frederick Kozanki and also Mrs. Harvey Turner, a new collection of photographs. And that is the Nichols collection of photographs. And if you go online to our website, you'll find a complete directory of the images that we now have. And they've all been scanned by Mr. Ken Riedl, who is our webmaster and board director member in the back there. And they are available for prints at $25 per print. And there's some really excellent pictures. Those images were on loan to us, but they have since been given to us. Mrs. Turner spoke to me and she said, well, I didn't think anybody wanted them. So, so we now have them. Well, in any event, I want to turn the meeting over to Mr. Roessler, who will be giving us a continuation, so to speak, of his talk that he gave us at the outset of this year, when we were all just panting and chomping at the bit to get everything started. And now, of course, we can't wait for it to finish. And this is the finish. So I turn over the meeting to Mr. Roessler. By the way, can I ask you a question, Randy?
Certainly.
I don't ever remember the Richards family looking quite that pixelated before.
Well, I left it that way because this picture shows up later in clarity, but I thought this looked kind of shadowy, like when you think about some of the memories, and of course some memories aren't so clear, and then they check you into a hospital and help you. But Bill mentioned a contact from Wales, and I have to tell you that when I was a little boy, we had a set of neighbors, my husband and wife, by the name of Clayton and Trefina Lewis. And Betty, you remember them? They were wonderful people. My sister and I, to us, that was a third set of grandparents. And Clayton knew Welsh and taught us that good evening was Borada and good morning was Nostar, which means they do a lot of rolling of the R. Big singers. Clayton was in the choir at the Congregational Church and the male choir in Watertown. So our presentation tonight is entitled, "And a Good Time Was Had by All." When you go through a lot of old newspapers, I've always been amazed at the things that they write about. You know, even when I was little, my first birthday was written up in the paper, and you know, Randy's first birthday, and there it is, and you know, and the other things on those personal pages, like, you know, the John Doe family traveled to Kenosha for Sunday dinner. Well, whoop-de-doo. Or you know, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Smith entertained guests at dinner, and out-of-town guests included, and they named these names and where they all drove from. And you know, I sometimes look at these issues of the Watertown Daily Times and I think, man, these people really needed to get out more often. But in many of the articles, they talk about the fact that they had played games in the afternoon, or they had if it was a birthday party for someone's birthday, that the person received many lovely gifts. But in the civic announcements from some of the groups and committees, they would announce that many pleasant memories were made, or that a good time was had by all. And certainly they did enjoy their memories. This evening's program is on the Octagon House. In summer or spring, when we did the program in June, was it June or April, Bill? Somewhere back there, April. That focused on the house as a structure. Tonight we're going to talk about the house and the family's memories. And the photos you'll see are from the house collection, from all of our photo albums that we keep from all the special events. And I owe Bill Yankee thanks and Judy Quam, because as I spoke with them, I got some of the statistics or the facts and figures. And technologically, I owe a big favor to a lady who just walked in. Stand for a second, Rochelle. Rochelle, oh, she's got her Octagon sweatshirt on. Now, I got to tell you a funny little history story here. This is Rochelle Day, and she helped me to get these from my computer onto a CD, because my CD writer wasn't there, and anyway, it's a long story. Rochelle moved back to Watertown about 1.5 years ago, and she moved here with her family, moved her business back here from the Las Vegas area, and she got involved at the Chamber of Commerce, which is my work every day, and we started working together. She serves on one of our committees, and we pretty much hit it off. We could tell each other up or down, sideways, it didn't matter. We had a very good working relationship, but we always had this feeling like we must have known each other. But she said she moved away when she was fairly young. And of course, I went to St. John's and then Watertown High School, and we just didn't know each other, really. And then one day I was looking through some old photographs, and there was my kindergarten picture with all of us from Lincoln School, from Mrs. Strayer's class. And over the years, some of my friends and I had written names on. And there were 3 people whose names we did not have. We had never identified. There's little Rochelle Wankey. So after 35 years, we solved the mystery of who that little girl was. Because we commented that when we worked together, we always had this feeling like we'd known each other or met someplace, but we couldn't figure out where because we had never been in that part of the country. So I know a lot of you work on family trees and family research, and you do that when you find your relatives sometimes. You recognize a connection. Sometimes you run screaming down the street. We've got people like that in the family too. But anyway, most of the time it's a fun experience. If you arrived here a little earlier this evening, you recognize that we were having some technical difficulties. Please stand by. I hope everything goes well. I've used this equipment many times, but I've never come upon it with every cord unplugged. And I finally got a hold of Pastor Jensen, who told me about one more cable, and then we found Pastor Werner, who didn't know about the machine but assured me he'd pray for me. So on we go. And now that Rochelle is here, and she's very gifted at electronics, if I run into a problem, I'll just get her up there. Can you see it if it's like this? This picture I used earlier this spring shows the Octagon House. Beautiful picture by Jeff Allen, thank you, principal at St. Bernard's. He's a wonderful amateur photographer, and he really captured the Octagon House. A beautiful reflection. And we always have to remember the Octagon House is a family museum or a house museum. You know, there are art museums, there are car museums, all different types of general, but a house museum is very special. You find very interesting collections and always, always, always a very special story. So as I said earlier, we're going to focus this evening on remembering the good times that were enjoyed by the Richards family and their friends. And then we're going to talk about the return to a lot of activity at the house through the years as a museum. The Richards family did have a lot of fun with their friends. They had many gatherings at the Octagon House. Unfortunately, they didn't have a camera in the 1860s. We don't know what all of those gatherings were like. And Bill and I still live in hope that we're going to someday find Anna Thomas's diaries and get more insights. The missing volumes, the first 400. Anna was a faithful diarist. She entered every day. What would you say, Bill? Maybe a little tedious reading. They're not real exciting entries. You know, done up. It'll say things like, and it's very, very, very common grammar. Done up the washing. Yeah. I ironed some today.
What I thought though was always rather nice is it usually ends a lot of her stuff by saying, all is well at this house.
Mm-hmm. And then inside of those little snippets that she writes each day, you find, you know, funny things like paid the phone bill today, and she'll mention the dollar amount. But then you'll also see things like Moses dead 1 year today, still miss him terribly. That was her brother, and other things. So you see the poignancy of the house and the touches of the family. And I'm going to just pause here for a second, if you wouldn't mind, because this isn't responding.
Of course I wouldn't mind.
So I'll just give you a hint when to hit enter. That way I can be back here and out of the camera's way. There are our original owners of the Octagon House, Mr. John Richards. You know, he's credited with being the builder of the home. And even though I've never married, I'm not stupid enough to think that his wife didn't help somewhere in that process. So when I give tours, I always refer to him as one of the two builders. He took care of the physical structure, but she certainly had to have had a hand in helping and making decisions. This is a very young Eliza, very striking, very lovely woman. I would guess this photograph to be the early 1860s.
Yes.
Typical hairpiece.
Just like Betty.
Straight, yeah. Betty Hebner, our longtime guide, refers to herself as Eliza when she's up there. This is Eliza in her, that's Eliza in her old age. Very pretty lady, very striking even as an elderly lady, very active, and by all accounts very hospitable, very kind to people. John was a little bit cantankerous at times, stood his ground, spoke his piece. Unfortunately, he died fairly young and only enjoyed the Octagon House as his home for about 16, 18 years. Eliza, on the other hand, spent almost 50 years in that house, and it really was a home to her and to many generations of her family.
What did he die
a stroke. He was up in Fond du Lac on business and was noticed to not be at the dinner table, and they found him in his room.
How old was he?
74.
74. And we'll move on then, Rochelle, to the next frame. Some other residents of the Octagon House making memories. Grandma Forbes, Eliza's mother. Now, this picture, especially when you get the close-up of just the face, is a little bit frightening. And extremely frightening. And I point that out for a reason. Dental work wasn't so great back in those days, and poor Grandma Forbes, I think, was lacking on teeth. It would seem she was a frequent visitor to the Octagon House. It would seem that she was very well loved in the family, but unfortunately just doesn't strike the greatest picture. But we have her there for memory.
So did she come here from out east all the time, or where did
They
she
lived
live?
up in Oshkosh.
They lived in Oshkosh with Eliza's sister. Eventually, the entire Forbes family had relocated to the Midwest. And while the Octagon House is nice, Eliza's sister in Oshkosh was married to a gentleman that was listed as a millionaire cattle farmer, which was a pretty good accomplishment in the 1800s. $1 million today is a good deal. Here we have Mary Alice, or sometimes referred to as Alice Green. She is one of the sisters. Our Anna, that we talk about often, and for whom I think most of us hold the highest regard. She spent her childhood, or late childhood, in the house, came back as a young mother, and died there in her mid-90s, 94, which is a good ripe age. Her brother Moses, named after an uncle, Charles, the youngest brother, and Willie. Willie was injured in a fall and eventually succumbed to his injuries. These 4 children in the fan part did live to be adults, and 3 other sisters predeceased them. 2 in their log farmhouse, Irene and Frances, and little Harriet died shortly after they moved into the house. Harriet died from lung fever, which we know today is tuberculosis. Okay. This is one of the last formal photos that show a lot of the family. This is taken around the turn of the century. We have a very, very old, frail-looking Eliza, her daughters, her son Moses, who grew to be quite the portly gentleman, if you look at him filling out the archway. And then Billy. This is Anna's son. Billy and his mother spent a lot of years at the Octagon House. But this is a photograph of the interior that we received back a couple of years ago. It had been on an incredibly long loan program and made its way back, and it helped us to identify how the house was structured as far as furniture and placement. It's a nice piece. 1909 on the top of this photograph, there's a family member right here by the tree. That's Billy. And there's a gentleman over here by the other tree, and then some other ones up in the rose bushes. This is from the south. Today, of course, this view would never occur because there are houses built in this area. But at one point, this was a view from one of the south lawns, or from the south lawn. And then, Rochelle, if you move to the next photograph, we are in the dining room at the Octagon House. I love to iron, I'll admit it. It's relaxing to me. I don't mind what I'm doing. But of course, in today's world, it's easy to iron compared to 100 years ago with a flat hot iron and starch and all that stuff. But look at the crease on that tablecloth. By goodness.
Cut your elbow on it.
This was from the Kreitzman collection of photographs. It's not as clear. I'm using a copy of a copy here. I did not have the time to get back up into the Octagon House for an original. But it's nice to see them at the table. I've looked at this picture even with a magnifying glass, and I can't tell if they're having dinner or just a good, healthy tea.
As far as I know, this is the wedding dinner for Billy Thomas and his wife Emma.
Okay. Well, now there you heard it. It's a wedding dinner.
1901.
Something has to have been cleared off the table because there aren't a lot of plates there to indicate a full dinner, but beautifully attired people, lovely setting, and of course the nice sunlight in the room. And Rochelle, if you'd move us along to the next one. Now we're getting into some of the later years of the family at the Octagon House and some of their pastimes. This was the photograph at the start of the presentation. You see it's nice and crisp. We have Billy, his mother Anna is back here. I would estimate that picture to be around 1915 based on the ladies' dresses and shirt styles or blouse styles. You know, by that point, Anna is well into her 70s. Here we are in the early 20s. This lady has the drop waist or sack type dress. And here's our Anna in the center of the crowd. Very jovial looking on these pictures. Here she is again with the Burt Atwood family. And you have